Hi, welcome back to the KaiNexus Continuous Improvement Podcast. I'm Mark Graban, a senior advisor with KaiNexus, and we're joined today by
Greg Jacobson, CEO and co-founder of KaiNexus.
So we're doing our occasional chat and conversation here about continuous improvement. And thankfully, it didn't sound like there was too much need for continuous improvement. We just all celebrated Thanksgiving last week. You had a good experience frying your turkey, Greg?
I did, and we were catching up on that, and we started to talk about checklists and standard operating procedures and
Safety.
Things of that nature. And Mark was like, "Wait a minute, why don't we start the recording now?" It's always fun. So we've been frying a turkey now in our family for maybe 15 years, and there's just been this effort of doing CI to the process. I don't think I've ever explicitly stated that we were doing that, but just kind of evolved. And as I've gotten older, and as the rest of the family has gotten older, I feel like I'm going to be the main person organizing that process sooner rather than later. So I started to take notes this time, and started to document my observations and start really a standard operating procedure. And then you said, "Oh, I'm sure you started a checklist." And that reminded me, no, I actually hadn't started a checklist, but I probably need to. That's a pretty interesting question, Mark. Do you think that, do you do standard operating procedure first? Do you do checklist first? Do those happen simultaneously? Does it matter?
I mean, like, to me, a checklist is a form of standardized work.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of times standardized work documents classically would include not just like what are the steps, but how long do the steps take? And there's some types of work where that is really, that matters, like especially for more like repetitive operations. I would say for something you're doing maybe literally once a year, like a checklist with certain reminders might be helpful enough.
Yeah.
But I mean, I did bring up the safety question, and since you're an ER doc, I mean, people's attempt to fry turkeys, that does lead to quite a few ER visits every year, different risk of burns or, especially from the boiling oil, right?
I certainly don't have any statistics, but I can't imagine it doesn't generate hundreds, maybe even thousands of ER visits. We have an outdoor fryer, and we've dialed it in. There's never been any misses or near misses that have occurred.
Well, that's good.
Got proper gloves. We've got this whole ladder contraption with a pulley system to drop the turkey, so we're not getting very close. One of the tricks, obviously, is going to be to have a stable base.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other trick is to make sure no one's, walking around it. And then dropping the turkey really, really slowly is super important. And it needs to be a thawed turkey.
Yeah. That's just what I was going to add. I think the one thing I saw a TV segment about turkey frying safety is that, any ice, that water plus oil is a bad combination. It creates splashes, right?
Yeah, no, it definitely it creates an explosion. I mean, it's pretty violent. I think, it could lead to someone's death if they were in the right spot. It's overnight in brine. So that's the benefit of the turkey frying. That's been marinated for a really, really long time. So I don't really know what the result of it would be if you didn't do that marinating process. We've always done that.
Yeah. I did a little quick Google research here. According to this one news source, deep fryer fires, this is probably not just turkey, but responsible for 5 deaths, 60 injuries, and the destruction of 900 homes. And then there was something specifically about turkey frying, $15 million in property damage annually.
Wow.
Yeah. No, I think that those numbers were from deep frying turkeys. So I'm not trying to dissuade you from doing that. I'm glad you're being mindful of safety and process.
Yeah. Well, it's been a fun process, and I have found a remote temperature sensor that apparently is rated to go in a deep fryer. And so that's going to be the addition for next year.
So no risk of undercooked turkey.
Correct. Well, we didn't have a risk of that because we're always measuring it, but for it to go wireless, we won't need to be near the oil or lift the turkey, or so we usually have a thermometer in the oil so we know how hot the oil is, but you're kind of moving things. Anytime you can not touch the oil, and the better. So,
well, we did a smoked turkey, and by say did, I mean the verb really is purchased. Cooking a turkey or you're trying to smoke one. There's a lot of time and effort, and there's a place north of Dallas, Greenberg Smoked Turkeys, that my mother-in-law ordered one from, and it was very good.
Very nice. Do you use any checklists or any CI principles in your Thanksgiving festivities?
No, I mean, for a meal like that, in the past, there's times where I've used a Gantt chart, not the KaiNexus Gantt chart feature, but to look at the timing of different dishes and prep time and cooking time. And, you don't want to be ready to serve everything else and find that your sweet potatoes are still cooking away.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And it's a perfect use for a Gantt chart.
Yeah. So an industrial engineer's holiday, Gantt charts and checklists and all. So,
at the end of the day, all these things reduce stress, right? I mean, I think that's one of the things I love about continuous improvement is that, stress is something that I'm always trying to reduce. I have a lot of things going on. And so developing standard work and developing checklists and developing, having a really complex meal, at least you've figured out what would be the ideal sequence of things. And does it make sense? I mean, you can't distort time, but you can certainly figure out when things should start boiling and when things should be taken out of the oven. So,
yeah. And then, like a lot of businesses, we went through, I could call it a make-buy decision of, okay, we're buying the turkey prepared. We bought a couple of pies and cooked, a lot of sides, from scratch ingredients. So reducing stress, something to be thankful. We were thankful for that. So before Thanksgiving, Greg and I, we were part of a team of KaiNexians who were up in Cleveland.
Yeah.
Early November, the AME conference, the Association for Manufacturing Excellence. So we were going to share some thoughts and reflections from the event. And Greg, you spent a lot of time talking to customers and potential customers at the booth. KaiNexus was an exhibitor. Like, what are some of the high level themes that come to mind of some of the conversations you were having with people?
Well, I think one, it was a great conference. It was nicely run. We got into a large number of great ideas. I always find it really interesting that it's kind of almost like this tension between people that are at a conference and then people that are a booth at a conference. And do I want to be talking to these people? Are they trying to sell something to me that I don't want or don't need? And I think that's probably would have been my mindset 20 years ago. Being at a conference, I think what's interesting is being on the booth side of things. I now take conferences completely differently. When I go to conferences, I go to literally every booth. I get more value from going to the booths. We go to this SaaS conference, and I don't go to any of the presentations. I literally go from booth to booth to booth to figure out, what is the product? Why would a SaaS company want it? What can I learn from it? How do we solve that problem? Is that pain we either have and know we have, pain we have, didn't realize we had. And so I think it's always this super interesting dynamic that once that kind of the ice is broken or once you start an actual conversation with an attendee and you start getting into, how do you organize the work? What kind of technology do you use? Typically pretty quickly, if it's not a good fit, we've learned a little bit about them. They've learned a little bit about us, and we go our separate ways. I'll tell you, we probably talked to 30 or 40 organizations, had really deep conversations about the challenges they have with managing all their improvement work, really on the organization side and the reporting side. It's been an interesting evolution over the last dozen years, right?
Yeah.
Of being in this, and whether it's brand, whether we're a more robust company, whether the product is more robust, whether there's been a shift in mindset on, how do you report and manage and categorize and, share this type of work. But it's very validating and refreshing, and to understand that we solve a problem that many organizations have, and many organizations have and don't realize they have or they didn't even realize the solution existed. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Compared to a decade ago, I think back then there was more of this almost kind of reflexive resistance to technology. Like, my sensei taught me technology is bad and Toyota doesn't use technology, which isn't true. And, we should always do it with paper and pencil. Okay, well, fine. And then, okay, we're not a fit for you. But nowadays, people more often than not they're using some sort of technology. And I know you and Jeff and Matt Banna, Jeff Roussel was also there. You're asking people, so what technology are you using? Like, what's the most common answer that you are getting to that question if they're not a KaiNexus customer?
Excel is definitely the number one technology that I think CI practitioners use, just in general. Yeah, and then I think you can pepper in some SharePoint. You can pepper in some custom built solutions. Those are probably your top three.
Or Teams. I think a lot of the SharePoint stuff maybe has evolved, or just a little bit different. But yeah, there's the problem that people are trying to solve. Let's say they're using Excel and SharePoint. Then there's the problems with those solutions, which is why people often end up coming to KaiNexus, right?
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, spreadsheets are incredibly powerful. I use spreadsheets multiple times a day to solve, obviously, all the things that people use spreadsheets to solve. Where spreadsheets break down is if you're trying to get a whole bunch of people to use it, trying to figure out which version is it, and then the fragility of them. They're really fragile pieces of technology. So they work really well in highly educated spreadsheet using people that are very cognizant of how to use the spreadsheet. As soon as you start getting into expanding the number of people that need access to that, and you start getting into situations where something like KaiNexus is going to definitely help you out more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then a lot of KaiNexus customers were there.
Yeah, we're very lucky and honored to have some great partners there. So we were not only able to see at AME a couple of our customers, but also did some on-sites. But Sherwin-Williams is a customer of ours, Cleveland Clinic's a customer, and MedMutual is now a customer of ours too. That we're all present. Winland Foods, we saw someone from there. I might be missing one or two, but it was just a lot of fun to see people in person. Did you were also in lots of conversations, Mark? Was there any things that stood out to you? Any conversations or themes?
Yeah, I love it's a combination of seeing familiar faces and meeting new people, or the modern overlap is meeting somebody in person for the first time who you feel like you've gotten to know really well through Zoom conversations the last couple of years. So Elizabeth Swan comes to mind for people who know her and her book. She did a webinar for us. Her book is Picture Yourself a Leader. It's one of those things like, oh, right. Yeah, I forgot we had never met in person.
Yeah.
many conversations and many, group Zoom calls, networking, comparing notes during pandemic times. So she comes to mind as somebody who was in that category. a lot of great conversations. The keynote talks, and so one of those people it was great to see again, Rich Sheridan from software company Menlo Innovations. His keynote talk was great, and I had some conversations with him. Somebody who I had heard of and had never heard speak. And I just got to meet briefly because I went up afterwards and thanked him for his talk, and I gave him a copy of The Mistakes That Make Us, was Bob Chapman, who is the CEO of a company, Barry Waymiller, which is like a conglomerate of different, I think like industrial products manufacturing businesses. And so given like that kind of like, you think kind of like old industrial industry, very progressive leadership ideas, like inspirational, from Bob Chapman. And so anyone who attended AME, and Greg was caught up in conversation, so I keep pestering Greg, when the recording's available, you got to watch Bob Chapman's talk, because he talks about what he calls truly human leadership. And you've got to care for your employees, and it doesn't come across as like paternalistic or anything, but like just really caring. And there's a TEDx talk that I can point people to in the show notes if they don't have access to the AME talk. But Bob Chapman was talking about the importance of learning from mistakes. That's where I felt like, okay, I've gotten in. I'm going to come shove a copy of a book at him. But really just talking about a very principled approach to leading a business and realizing financial results will then follow, as opposed to just directly and solely trying to measure financial results. Like, it was just a really inspirational vision of a leadership model and a company culture. I really enjoyed hearing him talk. I don't feel like I'm summarizing it real well, but people can go watch his TEDx talk.
I think that theme comes up over and over, this idea of if you focus on identity, you'll get the results, right? I mean, that's in habit science talk. It's, I'm trying to quit smoking, or I'm a non-smoker, or I'm trying to eat better, or I'm a person that eats healthy. And so it's almost like if you focus on here at KaiNexus, we have values and traits. If you focus on those, then the right financial outcomes will just be a side effect of that, versus the other way around is just not as successful of a way to live life. It's hard to make all those micro decisions if you're just focusing on a goal, versus if you have an identity or principles, in this case, as Bob mentioned.
Yeah, so that was definitely a highlight from the conference. Hopefully we'll see people next year in Atlanta, and it's overlapping Halloween again next year. But Halloween being the last day of the conference, which is, I think, a better day to ask people to wear costumes than day one, as it turned out this year. Because
Mark, what was the who did you dress up as? Tell the folks.
Basically Lean George Michael, which is a dated reference from the 80s now at this point. But in the Wake Me Up Before You Go video, he wore all white, he and Andrew Ridgely, and the shirt said in huge letters, choose life, which has different connotations than what that t-shirt might imply today. But I made a version of that t-shirt that says choose lean. And I had a wig and all white. And so anyway, I'd seen that video, and there was the documentary about George Michael. So that's why I think that was on my mind. But
you were hard to recognize. Like, that's how good of a costume it was.
Which is awful for networking then.
Well, yeah.
And there was somebody who, a guy, Tiago from Brazil, I'll give a shout out to, who has read some of my books and listened to the podcast, and he was excited to meet me, and he wanted to take a picture. And I'm like, oh, I'm wearing this dang costume. I did get a picture with him in regular attire without a wig the next day. So hopefully that's the one he would choose to share on social media. But
Yeah.
Other people wore costumes. There was a continuous improvement Barbie and Ken.
Mm-hmm.
There was some, there were some good costumes. But
you mentioned Menlo, and I'm reading a book where they were featured, and I hate to say this, I don't remember the exact book, but I believe it's Critical Influence. And that made me think that one of the things we wanted to do over kind of the next several podcasts was to go back to Chris Burnham's questions that he asked us back on those. So I didn't know if that was supposed to be a good time to transition. Yeah.
That is a great segue, because you started and I was going to carry the segue across that line. So yeah, we have a list of questions. Our dear friend Chris Burnham, when he was with us and he hosted the Lean Leadership Podcast, we encourage people to go check that out. Even though he passed away, the podcast is going to remain online, thankfully, and people can go check that out. But we have his list of standard questions, and we're doing one or two each time we do one of these episodes. So book related, do you have a favorite book, author, or mentor that you would recommend to our listeners? Now, Greg, it might be hard to pin you down on just one book. We could talk about a different book each time, I'm sure.
Right. Well, I'll start, and then I'm interested to hear what you're currently reading. I'll start with just a couple books that I'm currently reading right now. One is The Critical Influence, which is, I think, in its third edition, and prior editions of it was Influencers. And I think they changed the name because influencer in the social media world has come to mean something different.
Right.
And this book is really about how do you influence people. And one of the lines that comes from the very beginning is something to the effect of intentional influence is leadership. And so I thought that's really wonderful. They talk a little bit about the difference between influence versus manipulation. I think that's a really important concept to make sure we're not talking about manipulating people. We're talking about influencing people. Right. And it goes into really kind of this 6-box approach to thinking through areas that one would need to think about in order to influence a large group of people. And been really just thrilled with it. It's the second time I'm listening to it. And it does weave a lot of the kind of business and social concepts that have been written about over the last number of years. But there's talk of continuous improvement in there. There's talk about habit science. There's I'm sure other number of stories and cognitive science and behavioral science and organizational psychology, psychological safety, and so I'm really enjoying that book.
Yeah. And the title again is?
It's Critical Influence, or Crucial. Hold on, let me just get it. Crucial Influence: Leadership Skills to Create Lasting Behavior Change. Looks like that.
Joseph Grenny, Kenny Patterson, and 3 others. Crucial Influence.
The other
third edition. It says, yes.
Third edition. Yep. The other book I'm going through right now is Never Lose an Employee Again by Joey Coleman, which we did as a book club about 3 years ago. His Never Lose a Customer Again, and he has taken some of the kind of principles in Never Lose a Customer Again, and then applied them to onboarding employees, basically, and integrating employees into a company culture. And I'm really enjoying that. It's fun. He does the audio for his books, and so his personality kind of rings out there. And then just because it's not important, but it's always nice to go to a number of 5. I would love to answer. I always think Daniel Pink's book Drive is a really important book to understand what's driving people, what motivates people. And of course, James Clear, Atomic Habits, I have to throw in there, or any of the habit books that we talk about in our habit talks. And then finally, I can't not mention Mazaki Imai's Kaizen as my, beautiful.
I have a copy of it because I think we talked about it an episode or two ago, and it's still on my desk.
I don't know if you have thoughts about any of those or want to share some of yours.
Yeah, I mean, Imai's book is great. It's a highlighted and post-it flagged copy here. It's a great foundation for lean and continuous improvement, kind of one of the early classics in the whole field. I was going to share the one book I always go to, which I grabbed off my shelf before we go. Is this book, Donald Wheeler, Understanding Variation, The Key to Managing Chaos. And I think it probably surprises people when, they ask, what's your favorite book? And it doesn't have the word lean in the title. To me, this is such a foundational book. I was really fortunate to read it really early in my career because my dad took a class with Don Wheeler and had a copy of this book with the kind of, mystical, weird, spacey cover on it, Understanding Variation. It's what really taught me about control charts, process behavior charts, the application to management. And Don was kind enough. I don't know Don well, but I asked him and he agreed to write the foreword for my 2018 book, Measures of Success, which credits Don 100 times over for what he's written and what I've learned. So if there's this, I've given more copies of this book away over 25 years than any other book.
Well, that's amazing. I feel like, I don't know how you pair Measures of Success with Wheeler's book. I don't know if you consider it an extension, a primer, a continuation, but there does seem to be a lot of connection there.
I think there's a lot of connection. My book is maybe an extension of Wheeler's. You could certainly do very well only reading Don's book, but I think my book has additional examples, some more modern data sets to apply the same principles. That book's made such a difference, for me in my career, whether I had written Measures of Success or not.
Is he still with us or? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. Well, he's still teaching. He's still pretty active. I took a workshop with him in 2018 or 2019. So yeah.
I wonder if he'd be interested in doing a webinar.
I could try.
Yeah. No idea.
I think he's still very busy, but I can certainly try. Put that on the ask list. I'd asked him once about doing a podcast, and I think my mistake was, like I'd said, well, here's some of the potential questions I could ask you, and I think I went overboard and I freaked him out about a list that was too long. It would have been better to just say, Don, I'm going to ask you about your book. Would you be willing to come on?
Right.
But yeah, Understanding Variation, Don Wheeler. At least a key book. We're going to talk about other books other times, and we still have other questions from the Chris Burnham Lean Leadership Podcast question list to get to in future episodes.
It's great. I'm always amazed at how fast a half an hour goes when we get to chatting about lean and continuous improvement.
It does, and I want to thank the listener, viewer. You can add a comment if you're watching on YouTube. Tell us what's your favorite book, your author or mentor that you would recommend to people. We'd love to hear from you on that, or you could always share that with me, mark@KaiNexus.com. It would just be interesting to see and hear. We can add that as comments online somewhere when we share it on social media. We'll invite people to answer that question themselves. So, Greg, as always, thanks again for doing this. It's probably the last one we're going to do here in 2023. So we'll ring in 2024, the new year, and a new episode. How's that?
So I'll say what my fifth grade librarian would always get me on. My elementary school, I had her for many years. She would always, at the end of December, always say, "See you next year." And I always be like, oh yes, next year. So we'll see you next year. Would that work this time, Mark?
It works as well as it ever works.
Thanks so much, Mark.
Thanks, Greg.